This is New York. Okay, it's not. It's Hollywood's version of a Depression-era New York slum. And it was designed by Richard Day for the 1937 Samuel Goldwyn film, Dead End. But it's also a studio version of an elaborate and spectacular Broadway set designed by Norman Bell Geddes for the original Broadway production of Dead End. The set, constructed in California at the Samuel Goldwyn Studios, was meant to challenge how Americans imagine life in New York City. Because prior to low-cost air travel, interstate highways, and television, the popular image of New York City was constructed and disseminated by motion pictures. And an entire generation of Americans had crafted an idea of a place based on Hollywood's specifications that were mostly devoid of reality. But in the case of Dead End, there had been an initial attempt to bring a new level of realism and grit to the screen. At the heart of Dead End, the second play written by Pulitzer Prize-winning author Sidney Kingsley, who used his plays as a way to confront and examine social problems, is a gang of delinquent teenagers who spend their days swimming in the filthy East River, fighting and causing all-around general mischief, while in the background, a new high-rise luxury building and its corresponding luxury inhabitants navigate living in a neighborhood that for them might as well be another world. Drina, played by Sylvia Sidney, hopes to save her brother Tommy from a life of crime.
What's the matter with this? I'm late.
Late for what? For those no good kids? For playing in the street all day?
But notorious hoodlum babyface Martin, Humphrey Bogart, while on the run from the law, has come back to his old haunts, hoping to reconnect with his past, but instead finds trouble and may drag Tommy down with him. Drina turns to her childhood friend, Dave, played by everyman Joel McCrea, for help, but can he stop Martin without becoming just like him? Dead End ran for an impressive 2 years before it made its way from stage to screen, when producer Samuel Goldwyn, upon the urging of director William Wyler, bought the rights. When it came time to film the movie, Wyler wanted to take his production to New York and film on location. Goldwyn firmly said no. Goldwyn liked his films to be clean and glamorous, even if they were set in slums. He would later, in 1939, tell Wyler while he was filming Wuthering Heights that the stable boy, Heathcliff, looked too dirty and Wyler should have him cleaned up.
Goldwyn was always, how should I say, his pictures, he wanted his pictures to be clean and glamorous. All the women looking beautiful, the hair just in place, so you could see the hairdresser and the makeup man and the clothes, everything spick and span. And, well, not all pictures lend themselves to that.
Goldwyn also had a reputation of successfully adapting highly literary stage plays and novels for the screen. His adaptations of Dodsworth, Aerosmith, and an adaptation of Lillian Hellman's drama The Children's Hour, retitled These Three, were all box office and critical successes. Wyler was the director of These Three, and he and Hellman reteamed to tackle the challenge that was Dead End. Because Dead End was very firmly rooted in the city of New York, in the language and in the life of those living in the slums of a city deep in the Depression. Kingsley had seen all this firsthand, the kids eating out of garbage cans and swimming in the filthy river, sick and consumptive children, women reduced to prostitution so they wouldn't starve, and haggard and worn-out mothers who couldn't save their kids from the street. It was all true. In fact, the Dead End, in reality, was located at 53rd Street at the East River, and that luxury apartment building that overlooked the slums is the River House, built in 1931 on the site of an old cigar factory. Despite the surrounding squalor, the builder thought the location was an ideal spot because it would give wealthy apartment owners immediate access to a pier right outside their luxury doors to dock their yachts on the river. Wyler wanted to film on location to get that same level of realism that had permeated the play. When he suggested again to Goldwyn that they film in New York in an actual riverfront slum, Goldwyn said no. He just didn't want that much realism. Nobody wanted that much realism. In a letter dated April 25, 1937, Joseph Breen, head of the Motion Picture Production Code Administration, suggested that Goldwyn should be less emphatic throughout the photographing of the script in showing the contrast between conditions of poor tenements and those of the rich in the apartment house. In Breen's eyes, it just wouldn't do any good to stir up class division and class envy in a motion picture audience. So they built a set at an added cost of $300,000 that duplicated the multi-tiered slum of the stage production. Wyler hated it and complained the whole damn street looked phony. And while the set is impressive with its realistic Sutton Place terraces, wooden dock, and East River pier with polluted water, it does look phony with its rear projection of the cityscape, bridges, and river. The play had been praised for its realism and viewed as timely and socially important, but at every turn Wyler and Richard Day were thwarted in their attempts to bring that realism to the screen. In the book Goldwyn by Arthur Marks, Wyler recounts Goldwyn would continually drop by the New York street set and survey the film as if it were offensive to his sense of aesthetics, and shout in his high-pitched voice, "Why is everything so dirty here?" "Because it's supposed to be a slum area," Wyler would reply. "Well, this slum costs a lot of money, and it should look better than an ordinary slum," Goldwyn would shout back.
Dead End was about a slum district in an upper-class neighborhood. And Willie had quite rightly littered the street with garbage and garbage cans, and Goldwyn wandered down the set and said, "It's a disgusting-looking, filthy set." He said to Wyler, "Clean it up. Just clean it up. I won't have it."
So every morning the set would be dressed with garbage, and every morning Samuel Goldwyn would come to clean it up. And when Goldwyn had finished cleaning up the set, they would redress it all over and start filming for the day. Wyler knew he couldn't get the realism he desired, but it wasn't just Goldwyn's interference. It was also the production code, the rules and regulations that governed what content was acceptable to show in motion pictures. Hollywood films were subject to stricter censorship than stage productions, a fact that Hellman and Wyler were familiar with. Hellman's play The Children's Hour dealt with an accusation of lesbianism directed at one of the characters, and the fallout from that accusation. For the film version, These Three, Goldwyn was forbidden from even mentioning the name of the source material. The realism that had drawn crowds to the theaters to see Dead End would also not make it past the Hollywood censors. Elements of the story had to go. The girl Joe McCrae's character longs for is a kept woman. Babyface Martin's former girlfriend, Francie, is a prostitute suffering from a venereal disease. The play is full of profane and crude language, including ethnic slurs and discussions about sex. The Dead End Kids, a group of kids that had been in the play during its entire Broadway run, were brought out to Hollywood for the film version, and they didn't understand why so many of their lines were altered, and they balked at the changes. They felt a strong loyalty to Kingsley and his dialogue, and the code's censorship was stupid to them. It's stupid to us too, kids. Also, side note, to Kingsley and Wyler's horror, Goldwyn wanted to get Hollywood kid actors to replace the New York kids who'd inhabited the roles for over 2 years. Kingsley and Wyler won that round. The Dead End Kids stayed. So instead of realism, Wyler opted for expressionism, and with cinematographer Greg Tolan behind the camera, he used vertical shots, diagonal shots, and frame within frames to push home Kingsley's notion that an environment can trap individuals and crush them, or shape them for good or for ill. Wyler imprisons these characters in the space of this artificial New York City street and manipulates them to show us how confined they really are, and gives us a multi-dimensional examination of social inequality. The set constantly reinforces the contradictions of great wealth and great poverty stacked right up on top of each other. It's an abstraction of reality, but it works. Writing for Night and Day in 1937, critic Graham Greene gave the film a good review, characterizing it as one of the best pictures of the year, while voicing mild complaints that the film gives too melodramatic a tone. Variety gave the film a rather tepid review, praising the performances, but saying the picture says and does everything the play said and did, and stops right there. Dead End went on to be nominated for 4 Academy Awards, including Best Art Direction for Richard Day and Academy Award for Best Picture. Goldwyn sold the Dead End Kids contract to Warner Brothers, and they went on to appear in films with James Cagney, John Garfield, and Ronald Reagan. And they continued to make movies under various names, including The Little Tough Guys, The East Side Kids, and The Bowery Boys, all the way up until 1958. It wouldn't be until 1948 when Jules Dassin took his cast and crew to New York City to film the classic film noir The Naked City that movie audiences would get an actual, unvarnished, real view of New York City locations and all their glorious grit and grime. But that's another story. There are 8 million stories in the cinema cities. This has been one.